Hello, I'm Mischievous Mark Ginocchio, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy number 15, you might have heard of it, and all of the Amazing Spider-Man annuals, which I say do not count.
And I'm Dapper Dan Gavoston, and I too own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals. You may have heard of them, which I say definitely count. But for me, this book, Amazing Fantasy 15, you may have heard of it. I'm just learning about it for the first time, and that's why it remains a fantasy.
That's right, Dan. We have impressive collections, but that doesn't mean we have impressive opinions, right?
Fair enough. That was a comment left on the YouTube video. Leave it in, Rick. All right, Mark, let's get the show on the roll.
Welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. Thanks for joining us for the 8 Deaths of Spider Talk.
Yeah, if you want to swing along with us on our journey through Spidey's past, present, and future, subscribe to Amazing Spider Talk on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. Those reviews are important as they're the best way to spread the word about our show and indicate the size of our audience to guests and collaborators.
This podcast exists because of the support of our Patreon members. If you want to receive early episodes and exclusive artwork and keep this podcast going, go to amazingspidertalk.com and consider joining our Patreon. On the Patreon, we've already kicked off season 7 of the Amazing Spider Talk, where the first 4 episodes of that season are already available. So if you want to join our conversation about the David Michelinie era of Spider-Man, consider joining our Patreon.
Yeah, today on the show, Mark and I are going to discuss Amazing Spider-Man Volume 6, number 65, the 5th part of the 8 Deaths of Spider-Man interlude story before we get to the proper relaunch with a number 1 from Joe Kelly. This issue was written by the same Joe Kelly. The cover features artwork by Mark Bagley and Richard Isanove. And this is, for the record, the first Mark Bagley cover in his post-interiors retirement era. The interior pages feature artwork by CAFU. Someone's going to correct me on that. Covers by Frank D'Armida. And, of course, letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. This issue was first released on January 8th, 2025. And I have been referring to this book as Baby's First Nihilism.
All right.
Because this is not one of those issues that you're going to want to pull out and read over and over again, which is not like to besmirch its quality in any way. This is just maybe one of the most downer issues of Amazing Spider-Man ever. I mean, we've seen Peter Parker quit, but I don't think we've ever seen Peter Parker quit because he finds life and his entire purpose on it as Spider-Man to be completely pointless because he's indulged completely in the furthest extent of nihilism. But I think I also call it that because it's as if Peter had never considered the kind of psychology 101 concept of nihilism. We could talk about all this stuff, but it's also the return of Joe Kelly. And we had really said how much Justina Ireland was a step up for us in terms of writing duties on this book. And I know I was kind of a little bit worried that Joe Kelly coming back on this title would kind of not sink my interest in it, but lessen my enthusiasm. And I got to say, I feel the opposite of what I was expecting. This book is the first one, not the first one to make me really interested in this, but it felt like, to me at least, this one locked in what this story was trying to do and really made its purpose very clear in a way that I actually wasn't expecting. And so I was very pleased with this particular issue. Mark, how about you?
I mean, I don't know if I'm quite there where you are here. I mean, I do think this was an improvement on the relative scale of Joe Kelly. I appreciate the fact that I think he kind of slowed down his storytelling here. With that said, I don't know exactly how much clearer this thesis is. I cracked the joke about the meta commentary and we've been kind of saying from the get-go, what is the point of this in terms of Spider-Man terms? And maybe this gets closer to it, and we'll have to see where we go from here in the next couple of issues. But like, I still don't know at the end of this issue that I fully grasp the Spider-Man of it all in this story. I think that, you know, we do a better job of being introspective of Peter and kind of his experience, but like, it's still, I don't know, like, there's just something disengaging about this whole premise. And I don't know if this gets me closer, but I would love for you to try and convince me otherwise here, because you clearly saw something in here that brought you closer to the Spider-Man of it all, and maybe I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd love to engage in that. And a lot of that will cover what happens in this issue. You know, you've summarized it really well, but I think the kind of devil is in the details, so to speak, here. And also that, like, I will say that some of what I'm talking about here might be me kind of preempting the story. But thematically, I think, you know, if you see the thematic work that's been leading up to this particular issue, I think this issue really fits in with what came before. And thematically, my understanding of the story is that it's trying to teach Peter a lesson about finding joy in the moment to moment of his life, right? Not letting his role as Spider-Man, as outsized as it might be in this particular challenge with the Scions of Sidorak, to prevent him from finding joy and meaning in his life as Peter Parker, right? And so in this issue, you know, Syra starts off the issue. She's already gone down this nihilistic path, right? She says, oh, this whole, as you mentioned in your recap, like this whole challenge is completely pointless, right? Because she's already seen the death of everybody, and she has already adopted the viewpoint that we see Peter adopt by the end of the issue, which is like, nothing matters. Why even bother? Like, what's the point of all of this? And so when Peter grabs this orb that allows him to see the death of everybody he loves, whether it's real or not, and we're told explicitly, like, these aren't necessarily premonitions.
Right.
This is all an exercise in getting Peter to go beyond even the intellectualization of nihilism, or that like people's lives are pointless, but to experience it firsthand, right? Like, it's one thing for you and I to say we're specks of dust in the universe and we don't matter like a whole lot. And trust me, I've been to dark places in my life and had that thought many a times. But it's another thing, I think, to experience it firsthand. Whether any comic could make you experience that in 20 pages and have that really hit in the way this comic tries to is probably for the good of mankind that it can't convince you of that in 20 pages.
Right.
But anyway, so the story, like what Peter experiences, is all the deaths of all of these people in his life, and ultimately far beyond that. And every one of them is, except for Betty Brant, I think, which is something I want to kind of drill in on later. But all of them are kind of like these O. Henry twists of fate deaths, where like it tells you something great about what this person achieved in their life, but in their final moments or after they die, their work is kind of undone or made to feel hollow. Did any of those in particular strike you as like especially biting or like nihilistic?
Well, I mean, maybe like Randy's perhaps, but like, you know, I mean, like, I think Maze was meant to kind of function as a sucker punch of sorts, but look, I understand obviously what what Kelly is trying to accomplish here. And I guess like in that regard, it's mission accomplished, but like, you know, not to take nihilism and respond with nihilism, but it's like, why are we doing this in a Spider-Man comic? Like,
Okay.
what
I'm
is
gonna get to that. I'm gonna get to that.
yeah, what is the, like, why are we doing it this time? It just feels like a writing exercise, and like that's cool and all, but like this isn't Spider-Man either, you know? I'm
Okay,
sorry, it's not.
I'm gonna get to that because I really think it is. I think it's really about
Okay,
Spider-Man.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to really sell me on it, man.
Okay. I'm just so move past getting your reaction to the individual moments. Like
Sure.
this is an exercise in perspective, right? So like you can, as narrated by Syra, all of these people's deaths are extra bitter and hard to take, right? Like Felicia, like, you know, spends her whole life giving from the rich to the poor, and yet when she dies, all of her earnings are given to the prison industrial complex, right? Like these are really bitter. The Randy one, he gets trampled by the very same people
Right.
that he encouraged to protest and regrets it in the final moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are really bitter. But that is the perspective of Syra and what she's doing to Peter by making him hyper focus on death and the end goal of all of these things, right? He's not like, she's shifting his perspective away from the joyful moments and successes that they have in life to focus on like the greater death element of it all, right? And I think that's very true of Peter throughout many of his adventures, right? It's all about, what are my responsibilities as Spider-Man? Like, I need to like destroy all the other joy in my life because I have to atone for this thing as Uncle Ben. Or the era of no one dies, which I think this is a direct response to, which is like Peter so hyper fixating on preventing death that, which is an unrealistic goal. And he even admits such here, right? Because everyone does eventually die. You can't stop people from dying, right? Like, what is the ultimate end goal of Spider-Man? He can't prevent this, right? So what this story is doing is like hyper fixating on the thing that Peter often gets lost in. And that's what causes him to quit, right? But it's and again, I don't want to preempt the story, but like the thematic point up to this point is all of these people trying to teach Peter about, hey, like, you're the underdog from Randy, like, you know, but that's a triumph in itself. Like, the odds are stacked against you, but Spider-Man always stands up. And Shay being like, you've got to find joy in the moment as Peter Parker and enjoy your time with me. And Felicia too, saying a very similar thing, right? And so like these are the supporting cast members who are trying to rewrite Peter's perspective to help him find that healthy balance between his role as Spider-Man and his role as Peter Parker. And this Syra and this challenge is pushing him to an extreme in the other direction, right? Which causes him to give up by the end. Now, obviously, he's not going to quit being Spider-Man
Right.
by the end of this story, right? There's going to be a redemptive arc, which is him learning that everyone is going to die, you know, and that's the mantra of this issue. Everyone dies. Like, but he has to learn the other side of the coin, which is like, yes, everyone dies, but that doesn't make it pointless. Like, the good that you do every day has value.
Sure. I guess, look, my issue is I just don't see it as the grand statement that it's being projected to be here. I mean, like, I feel like Peter as a character has gone on this journey many times in more effective manners, whether it be the death of Gwen, the death of Uncle Ben, the death of George. I mean, like, the death. I mean, but it's the easiest way to synthesize that from Peter in terms of like figuring out, you know, what is the point of all this, if, you know. So like, I feel like doing it in this fashion in what is, you know, clearly a hyper, I'm going to just say, fictionalized version of what life is. It's intentionally manipulative of Peter.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, I guess for me, I'm just like, I you know, color me naive, but I just feel that Peter should be past this by now. Like, why is this, why is he going to learn the lesson now if he didn't learn the lesson when Gwen died in his arms, and then, you know, he had an opportunity to kill the Green Goblin for revenge and said, no, that's not the answer either. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't feel that this is as momentous in terms of this, of a statement, as you're putting it to be here. I just kind of,
I can see that,
I found this to be
yeah.
very divisive and just kind of Deus Machina, and like, okay, cool. But like, I'm just not there, Dan. I'm just not. I'm sorry. But like, you know, you can, you know, have your feelings with it. I just don't see it that way.
I think that's fine. And I, like I said, getting into that, like, I don't think any comic could make you feel like, you know, I read the final page of Peter giving up. I was like not convinced by it, because like, how could I be convinced that, like, you know, unless I was already prone to nihilistic thinking, and I'm not in that mode of my life right now. So like,
Right.
you know, like some people are going to get more or less out of it than others. But I also think like, okay, sure, maybe we've had stories like this before, but like, why after the death of Marla Jameson did Peter go through like No One Dies? Like,
Right.
he didn't care about Marla Jameson a whit a few issues earlier, you know. Like, I'm willing to, you know, for me, the point of doing this magic thing, you know, which I, you know, like, for the record, was not convinced of, but like, the reason to do it is to put Spider-Man up against and give you the tapestry to paint something much bigger than you could normally do. And so, yes, it is divisive, and it is, you know, magic as like a do whatever you want, but like, I'm okay with it. I think they've earned it up to this point, and I see thematic follow through here in a way that, like, maybe I'm grading on a curve, but like, I don't. One, it's been a long time since I felt like I got an issue of Amazing Spider-Man that like wore its ethos and its statement so broadly on its sleeve. Like, I look at the Wells issues, like as much as I liked a lot of them, I don't know that I could tell you what the thematic operating ethos of that run was. Like, I mean, I could say it's about recovery and blah, 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 but it was never really so, whether it's plainly put or focused on. And here, I think 5 issues in a row, we've been really building to this kind of thematic statement. And one that I think calls on the history of Spider-Man, even as a direct counter to No One Dies. And I got to say, I find it refreshing, because like, if the end of this is about moving away from death and finding joy again, like, if that's a mantra the book could put at the core, I would love that. Like, how dark the past 200 plus issues of Amazing Spider-Man have been, and joyless many of them have been.
See, no, I'm going to push back on that, because what I was thinking as you were going through this siphon of joy, if you will, has been a recent phenomenon with Volume 6, in my opinion. Like, I feel like, you know, joy has been a central part of Spider-Man far more recently than that. But like, there was intent with the beginning of the Zeb Wells run to take that joy away, and that was why, you know, even, you know, the death of Kamala Khan, you know, I said very openly on this podcast, like, where is the joy of this book? And that's, you know, that is the root of it. And that's, I think, maybe another reason why this is not ringing true for me, is because I feel like, you know, a decision was made, I think, to take something kind of central from the, you know, the heart and soul of this book a bit, and to take it out as a, you know, a bit of a device, if you will, for this character and his journey at this point. And like, to me, it's completely unearned to be like, okay, well, now we're going to get it back to him, because it's like, but this is something that has been, you know, even in his darkest times in the past, there has been an element of joy to Spider-Man, because there is something so fantastical, and the youthfulness of the character. These are all central elements that kind of, I think, tie directly to the joy in the face of tragedy, in the face of overcoming the odds. And instead, we have taken that all away, and we have sucked that joy out over the last 3 or 4 years, if you will. And now
You don't
we're
include like the second half of Nick Spencer's run in the kind of like JMD pastiche joyless Spider-Man.
I don't know if that was about joy or joyless. I think that was just bad storytelling, if I'm being honest with
Okay,
you. I
fair
mean,
enough.
yeah, because yeah, I don't know what those issues were trying to say either, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know. Like, I just don't. I found for me, I think it was a very intentional choice at the start of volume 6. Like, I mean, from the beginning of what did Peter do to the fallout with MJ, it was following a very specific pattern, because that is the stories Zeb Wells wanted to tell. We've speculated
Yeah,
why that is the
issue
case.
25 might be the lowest point in Peter's life short of Uncle Ben.
Sure.
Like him finding out that MJ had moved on, and he walks out and the Fantastic Four abandon him and he collapses on the floor. Like maybe the most joyless moment in Amazing Spider-Man history.
Right. And then he doesn't even get his moment against Wyatt. So, like, there you go. It's just, this is where this book has been for a while. So, like, if we're going to use, the Scions and, the 8 deaths or whatever to bring Peter back. I mean, hell, whatever, bring joy back to this book, sure, but like I'm not giving it credit. I guess that's where it boils down to. I'm not giving it credit for taking a central part of a book and a character that I've loved for so long and taking a piece out of it and then reinstating it in this kind of haphazard way, which I still don't think makes sense from a spider sense. But like, whatever, that's like I said, maybe I'm just being nihilistic about this book, but it's still not clicking for me. I think this is an improvement for Joe Kelly in terms of, we're not telling jokes with a machine gun. And I like that he's being a little more thoughtful in his narrative, but this story still doesn't completely add up for me. It just doesn't, like, and like taking me on this book, sure, maybe it's going somewhere, but as you alluded to at the very beginning of this episode, this is not a book that I'm going to pull out and reread. Like it's a dour, really sucky book. Not like sucky like bad quality, but like, who wants to read this? Like, who wants to read everyone dying? Like it's still supposed to be a superhero story with fantastic things happening. There is joy usually at the center of that, and it is absent from this book completely. And like I like, so that's great. Let me go read some Alan Moore now. I got called out in the Slack. I'm on the Slack again because I didn't like Miracle Man. Well, you know what? Like,
I mean, this is
here.
vaguely in that vibe.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like it's not for me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And again, I could be totally wrong. Like I have been very wrong about the arcs of these stories. Like this could be like, hey, guess what? Like the new pitch of the new Joe Kelly run is what if Spider-Man read a bunch of Nietzsche and decided to reflect on it, like, and I wouldn't be down for that, but as a like climax of this story where we're going to offer the character a chance to make a choice and make a change, I'm hoping at the very least, like to me, this worked as a like low point to move forward the themes, especially if I'm treating this as like a 3-arc structure across these 10 issues. I could be very wrong, but in that regard, it like worked for me in following up the themes of this and kind of like playing off recent history, which again, I have liked Spider-Man comics over the past 5 years, but I have found them very bleak. And,
yes.
I again, maybe I'm reading too much into my predictions of where this arc is going, but like, as someone that is engaged in negative nihilistic thought, like I can see like how perspective is playing into that here, and I thought it was really well constructed, even if it isn't a typical kind of like thematic space for Spider-Man to be in. Yeah.
Let me just give you one more piece of context here, Dan. So I went to a college where we had an honors program where freshman year, the climax of the seminar was we read Nietzsche. And like as a freshman in college, like Nietzsche was mind blowing. It was like Nietzsche and Freud. Those were like the two coins where everyone's just like, oh my God. And like, like everyone, once we started reading Nietzsche, like it was, we're just quoting Nietzsche and like, using Nietzsche to poke holes in everything in our lives and all that kind of stuff. Fast forward to our senior years in college within the same program. And as seniors, we would laugh at the freshmen who were like, Nietzsche, man, boom, because it was just like, oh, man, like you'll move on from that. You'll learn. You know what I mean? And maybe that's just where it is. It's just like, to me, I still feel like as a civilization, we need to advance beyond the pointlessness of everything, because it's like, if everything is pointless, then what are we doing here? And like, maybe I just have an internal drive where I feel like even if in the grand scheme of things it's not true, I think I have a purpose, even if the purpose is doing a podcast with you and running dumb races and collecting comic books. You know what I mean? That's my purpose. And anyway.
I get that, and I don't know necessarily if we're meant to buy into Peter's conclusion at the end of this.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, you don't want him to quit being Spider-Man.
Of course not. And he's not going to quit being Spider-Man.
No, he's not going to. Right.
Or there's not going to be the Joe Kelly solo run in a couple of months. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. Like Joe Kelly just had this. Like, he read Nietzsche. Like, he's been having some nihilistic self-thought, and he's like, "Why don't I exercise this in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man and cancel the title?"
See, I think the challenge is, can Nick Lowe consistently spell Nietzsche right in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man? I'm sorry.
I mean, he's got a tall task ahead of him, right? Like, if in this issue he's proven that like life isn't worth living and like nothing matters, he has to prove that something matters in the next few issues, and that's a tall task for a superhero comic. So we'll see if Joe Kelly is up to the challenge of like making me recommit to the value of living. And maybe for me that's just a good amazing issue of Amazing Spider-Man,
right?
Which is hard enough to come by these days. But anyway, was there anything about the kind of execution of these like deaths or the sequences of it, real or imagined, that you thought was like artfully done? I mean, I particularly liked the kind of appearance of Coulson as this shadowy figure that slowly emerged as Peter gained understanding of death.
Yeah, I mein, although I do kind of question like Coulson, kind of the role of Coulson in this, because like he's just kind of been this, like Uatu style figurehead overseeing this whole thing, and like it almost feels like, not that he's putting his thumb on the scale here, because he's not, but he's kind of like cheering Peter on, or at least like urging him to stay in the fight, if you will. But like, again, like this is all. No, I have zero complaints or criticisms in terms of the artfulness of the storytelling here. It's just, I'm kind of throwing my hands in the air about the story itself, in terms of like, is this really what we need to advance Spider-Man at the moment? But I think that all of these, you alluded to it earlier, the O. Henry-esque irony in all of these, they all rang true. Like, there was nothing in here where I was like, well, what's the point of, why would they say that for this character? You know what I mean? Like, MJ, well, I mean, of course it's MJ as Jackpot, which I'm just like, but it's the,
what do you think
the
about
status quo? I know, like, so, but anyway, What were you going
Well,
to say?
what did you think about MJ's like death is basically a callback to One More Day.
Right.
Like she's like alluding to like a life that she never got to live, and dies unhappy and unsatisfied. And the implication being that like Paul wasn't enough for her,
Right.
and didn't actually fulfill her needs as a lover, so to speak, or as a partner, but really it should have been Peter all along, you
Right.
know? Like, I mean, I think that's like not even like subtext. It's like,
Oh yeah, no, it's there.
yeah,
I mean,
it's right there on the page.
but she's going to stay with Paul, damn it, because the internet needs to be crossed.
Yeah, they need to be fed. Their anger needs to be fed.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought the Aunt May death was like touching, but also interesting in that it like was almost a direct recreation of, spoilers, her death from the Marvel video game from a few years ago. I know you haven't played it. Sorry, Mark.
I don't have a PlayStation. I haven't had a PlayStation since 2004, Dan.
Well, one day it'll be cheap enough that you should go play it because the story is excellent.
All right, cool.
I thought JJ's death was like, or JJJ's death was like really appropriate.
Mhm.
Like, not only like to like how Fox News, which, you know, he's clearly a stand-in for, like operates these days, which is like Sean Hannity or, you know, whoever it is, Tucker Carlson.
You mean the Secretary of
immediately
Defense?
Replaced. Yeah.
Sorry.
Randy was a nice kind of callback to the Crisis on Campus,
Right.
you know, issues, which I thought was kind of cool. What did you make of like Betty's death? Because like she's the only one that seems to be spared from the O. Henry death. Like she dies with her family around her and she's like worried that they're going to split up after she dies, but ultimately says like, it doesn't matter, that she just wishes them simple lives.
Right.
Why spare Betty of all people?
I have no idea. I guess it's nice that somebody was like spared something completely traumatic, but like I couldn't even fathom, I guess, why Betty Brant kind of rose to that level versus everyone else.
I found it interesting that Spider-Man was not present in any or responsible for any of their deaths. Like
Right.
as soon as he touched the globe, I thought for sure the visions were all going to be him failing
Right.
in some way to save all of these people. Maybe you could say the Spider Kids like
Sure.
are his responsibility, which is why he reacts in such an outsized way. I thought the Norman death was obviously very appropriate. You know, like a guy whose his ego is his driving function, being a footnote in history and ultimately forgotten is, you know, kind of what we wish on all of the worst global figures that are ruining people's lives. So yeah, I mean, I think those were artfully done. But you mentioned something I wanted to kind of come back to, which is like that Coulson kind of cheers Peter on, which is kind of interesting for a figure who is the representative of death because he is the Infinity Stone of Death. The newest Infinity Stone of Death.
Sure.
I don't know if you read Infinity.
I
Watch.
haven't yet. But
okay.
I am aware through this comic. Yes.
Okay.
Got it.
Like what did you make of that? Like, is that a direct rebuke of nihilism? The guy who's seen it all is rejecting this worldview?
I don't know if I don't know what it's trying to say. Like I said, like I was kind of taken only by the fact that, like, you know, to this point, Coulson has kind of been like, you know, almost like a form of the Watcher here. So it was kind of like, oh, okay. Like, you know, the fact that even he is just, I don't, what's your take? I mean,
I mean, that's kind of my take is like that, like, he right now is standing in as like, you know, he's seen the same thing that Syra has seen, ostensibly, right. I imagine. It's like, but he hasn't come out of it completely hopeless, you know? And so I know we've got that 0.1 issue coming up that focuses on him. And I wonder if that's going to be his role, is to provide an alternative vision for all of this. We'll see where that ultimately goes. All right, well, let's take a break, Mark, from all of this nihilism and talk about where you can kind of join in with our Spider-Man community. Mark, tell the listeners at home where that might be possible.
Well, speaking of pointlessness, no, I'm kidding. Hundreds of listeners like you hang out in our community of Spider-Man fans on Slack. The amazing Spider Slack community is absolutely free to join, and you can jump into active conversations with awesome people about collecting, conventions, movies, new comics, old comics, and more. Dan, what's been going on in the Slack this week? And I might actually know what's going on, but you can tell people first.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is something that is new to anybody listening to this that's not already a member of our Patreon, is that the second episode of season 7 was recently released on the Patreon, and that was our The Great Marriage Debate episode, where we are debating, or really you are debating against internet Spider-Man historian Donovan Morgan Grant, the merits of the spider marriage. Do you want to tell everybody a little bit about that who hasn't heard that episode yet?
Yeah, well, Dan was a coward and decided to, like not have an opinion about the purpose of the marriage and whether it adds or detracts from the story of Spider-Man. So no, I mean, we've already talked several times over the last 11 years, 12 years. We're
12 years,
on 12
almost
years
12
now.
years.
Yeah. Of this show about Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 21. We had our wives talk about it. We've talked about it. Was it an essential? I don't even know. But we've talked about the wedding issue a bunch of times. So it's obviously a key component of the run of issues in our season 7, which is the late 80s of the Spider-Man era. So we wanted to kind of bring a new spin on it. And what we decided to do was just have a highly intellectual discussion between two people taking opposing viewpoints about the premise of the marriage and its overall merits and demerits in terms of the story of Spider-Man. And I'm sure I'm going to have a hard time shaking this the nuance of this opinion after this episode, but I'd like to say that I have been someone on this show who many times has said, I like the marriage, but I don't need the marriage. But I decided, for the sake of good podcasting, I was going to be anti-marriage. But
Mark took the bullet.
I am a grown boy. I can be negative, but but that was the thing. I don't think anything about this conversation was heated or nasty or toxic or anything like this. This was a legitimate discussion using the merits of the storytelling, both preceding and following Amazing Spider-Man Annual 21 to talk about the premise of the marriage in the comics and whether or not it is needed. And I will admit, Dan, I felt I held my end of the bargain up pretty well. I did a good job. As I joked with Dan earlier, I could have been an asshole, but I wasn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, to Mark's credit, there is a vote that is going on right now about who won the debate and who is and whose view won the day. And it's neck and neck. I mean, it might as well be 50-50.
I won by a lot, Dan.
Well, we'll see how much
everybody's saying it. Everybody's saying it.
Yeah, of course. Well, and so to that point, the reason we're talking about this in regards to Slack is, our Patreon members on the Slack have kind of broken into debates on the Slack, not necessarily over the value of the marriage, although certainly that has happened there many times before. I wish it would stop. But it's been a really good conversation about the debate that was had on the show. And the voting has been happening on the Patreon, and it's been a really fun experiment, and people are really getting into how this was done. And I don't think this is the last time that we'll probably use this format, given how much of a good response we've had to it. So, first of all, if you aren't a member of the Patreon and you want to hear that debate and vote on your thoughts about the marriage, go check out the Patreon. But the Slack, continues to be a great place to discuss all the things that are going on in the show and in the world of Spider-Man. Enough that, Mark, you even came out of Slack hiding and jumped on the Slack because your ego demanded it.
I remembered my password, Dan. But no, I mean, Dan messaged me and was like, you really should check it out. And like, now, granted, Dan has said that before. And I've said to Dan, no, I'm not going to do it. But, no. I love the Slack. The reason why I'm not in there more, as I've probably alluded to here before, but I will just say it plainly for all of you listening at home. I'm old and I have a hard time managing the social media accounts that I have right now. Although I deleted a bunch of them after November, so I guess I can make more room for the Slack. So that is why I showed up. So there you go.
Well, you guys all heard that promise to join the Slack right now here on the show. And if Mark can be any recommendation to you, it's that you should promise to come join the Slack. So we hope you'll see you in there. There's a link in the description to this episode that'll get you in. And the very fact that we've buried this ad 40 minutes into this episode means it's an exclusive community that's free of all the assholes you wish you could avoid on other social media platforms, because they're at least willing to listen to Mark and me talk for 40 minutes before learning about this Slack's existence. So go click on that link, sign up. We'd love to see you in there. I still think it's the best place to talk about, well, honestly, anything, whether it's Spider-Man or otherwise. I think it's the best place I spend my time on the internet, which, like Mark, is becoming increasingly fewer places. But anyway, let's get back to the nihilism of Spider-Man comics. I want to talk about the rules of this challenge again, because I think every new issue we get of this, if there's one demerit I think I could issue broadly to this ongoing miniseries, if you will, it's that they took something simple, which is there are 8 scions, there are 8 bosses you gotta beat, and you got 8 lives to do so.
Right.
Can Mario jump over Bowser without losing all 8 of those lives?
Right.
And every time we do this, I feel like it gets increasingly more confusing or uncertain as to how that works, to the point that we opened the post recap here with you going, did he die in this comic? And it is my understanding that he died. And
I don't see that in the text anywhere. So if you have, please, someone help me. I don't understand.
Yeah, but even if he like, let's say he does die, even then I'm uncertain of how he wins this challenge, because Cyrus states very plainly at the beginning, like, hey, if you put this down, I win, right? If you put the death globe down, I win. And whatever that means, like, does that mean the competition's over? I guess so. And that lets Sidorak out to rain blood all over Earth or whatever. Fine. I can understand those stakes, okay? Which means that Peter didn't do that because he won. Okay, so how did he win? Well, Doctor Strange says that he witnessed 173,000 people die. I don't know about you, Mark, but there's more than I think there's more than 173,000 people on planet Earth right now, if that's the implication, right? Like, I also think the globe is round, so sue me, okay? So my read on this comic, because I agree with you, Mark, it's very unclear, is that Calyx goes out of turn when Peter is distracted. And I think this is in the text. Like, Cyber tells him, no, it's not your turn. And Calyx says he's distracted, and he starts murdering Peter while he's still holding onto the sphere. And Peter's strength is so strong and his endurance is so strong that even while he's being killed, he still manages to hold onto the sphere. But when he dies, my read is that it's a technicality and he wins because he didn't put it down. And then you see the globe evaporating as he is being like revived by Coulson. And that is not spelled out. Like, I reread it multiple times, and I think that's my takeaway. And speaking of the Slack, I even asked them, and they were like, yeah, I think that's right, but none of us are certain. And it gets back to my essential critique of Amazing Spider-Man for the past 10 years, which is like, it's 90% there. Where is the editor to smooth out the last 10%?
I have no other feedback for you, Dan, because it's like I said, I summarized it incorrectly in my synopsis because it was not clear to me. So that's a major problem, but we've had these problems before. So
yes.
So nihilism.
I just
What's
feel, again, a good editor looks at this and goes, that's not clear. Let's clarify a main point. It's called the freaking 8 Deaths of Spider-Man. We should understand what those mean.
Right. And, we've had previous issues where the death was not clear, but then it was like, but I've used the reed of Ragamaga Bing Bamboo. And he, that is the sign that he has died. I don't know.
I'll also point out, this is going to get really nitpicky. Are you ready for this, Mark?
All right, I'm here.
Okay. On the recap page, those beautiful double page spreads where they've got the tombstones in silhouette, right? Like, my understanding was, hey, like, we're going to get those crossed off for every death that Spider-Man has had up to this point, right? Like, because there's 8 tombstones, he's got 8 lives, and each one's going to fill in as he dies. But in this issue, it opens and there's 4 tombstones with the markings on them saying what my assumption was, that he died, right? Now, okay, so maybe it's because there's 4 issues previously to this, and this is the 5th issue. But there's 10 issues in this miniseries, and there's only 8 graves. So it's neither the number of issues or the number of times he dies, because up to this point, in this issue, he'd only died 3 times. So, like, that's nitpicky, but, like, it's a motif at the beginning of the thing. Like I want to understand what that is.
What else we got for this issue?
Does it make it better that I said it was nitpicky before I complained about it?
No, it doesn't. Look, you do you, boo. All right?
Okay, let's talk about the art here, because, CAFU, coffee, whatever his name is.
Calix.
I'm assuming Alex, just spelled weird. I feel bad because I should know, like, what these people's names are and all that.
How dare you? How dare you?
How dare I? An artist who I think's work has been very strong in other titles. I've really liked their work on Venom. Bringing along Frank DeArmida to do the coloring here. What'd you think of this art?
Yeah, it was very strong. I mean, like, I thought this was a step up from the last couple of issues, if I'm being honest. Like, I mean, like, again, I still feel like McGinnis is probably the best artist we've had on this run. But, like, look, like, if McGinnis, frankly, has also kind of, whether by coincidence or not, like, has kind of fed into the machine gun method of storytelling. So maybe having someone that's a touch more grounded and kind of, again, slow Joe Kelly down, or maybe he'll work with CAFU again and it'll be like at McGinnis. I don't know, but, like, I just felt like, whereas, overall, I like McGinnis's art the most. I think this was probably the most well-rounded issue in terms of art and story and everything just kind of making sense, except for the fact that, we're talking about things that weren't clear. And yes, that's also editorial and that's also scripting, but, like, the art didn't show it either. So, so I guess technically a demerit, but, like, overall, I thought it was strong.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, whether, like, the way that we've categorized McGinnis and his creative pairings, we must expect that he is like the silliest, goofiest dude on earth,
right.
given how much like the silliness comes out in his issues. And I agree with you. I think he's very talented, but he has a track record of just making like, whatever it is, these writers just go goofy as heck with him.
Yeah.
But like to that point, like I think this art was incredibly well paired by the editorial team with the story that they were telling. I mean, this is a much more grounded, physical, tactile, rendered artwork that really brought real weight and heaviness to this. Like Aunt May in her hospital bed with the sores on her face. Like I can't imagine Ed McGuinness doing this issue and it landing in the same way. I mean, even down to like the coloring that Frank DeArmata does on Peter's outfit to make it more Doom-like. It finally felt like he was wearing a suit of armor, like Doom would style, rather than just like a Spider-Man costume that happens to be silver.
Right.
And like all of that rendering by the colorist and the artist, I think really went a long way to selling me on the reality of this, even though it was a fantasy. All of these different scenarios felt very real. And the standout image to me, I mean, I loved the opening page of Syra as we're looking kind of up at her and she's dominating the splash page. I thought that was a striking way to open a book visually, but the image of like Peter and Phil Coulson kind of kneeling and embracing each other as all of these people's memories kind of burst out of them, I thought was incredibly beautiful. And I also wanted to like, this might go to Joe Kelly, but also to the art team for their restraint in the beautiful sequence of Peter kind of chasing after Coulson as we get these panels of all these people that are dying. Like that could have been an Easter egg fest where it was like, the first thing I did when I saw that giant spread was like, who are all these people in these little images? And yeah, there's a couple supervillains here and there, but like mostly it's anonymous people. And I just really wanted to applaud the restraint from like, because I could see like here comes fictional Dan Slott again, my favorite character, like, just inserting all of these. Here's Charlie. Here's here's all the little characters from like Amazing Spider-Man 700.
Tim Harrison and yeah.
I mean, none of those would make sense there because they're already dead,
right?
Ostensibly, but like, I was glad to not see that because I think it made the moment land in a way that didn't make me like instead focusing on who were all the little people in the background.
Just very quickly, did you have any thoughts on the Bagley cover? It kind of struck. I mean, I know we've talked about Bagley's retirement, but like it still kind of struck me to see him do a cover for the first time in a while. You know what I mean? I think this is the first Bagley cover we've gotten at least since Volume 5. So, anything to add on what he did there, or nothing?
I mean, it's kind of like an homage to like maybe
like 100?
Issue 100.
Yeah, that's what I was getting.
And like Floating Heads of Guilt and all of that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it was good, but like it didn't strike me as something I haven't seen Bagley do 100 times over. And I feel kind of the same way about the next issue with Peter kissing Felicia on the cover. Like they're attractive images, but not quite as striking as I think like what we were getting earlier in Volume 6 in the Wells run, which I think had a slate of really strong covers.
Yeah.
And frankly, like the covers from this kind of like mini run have been good, but I think most of them have been kind of over cluttered and busy.
Yeah.
And this one too. I just don't think the kind of core image is quite as striking.
Yeah. No, I agree. It was just kind of like when as soon as I saw it, I mean, I could recognize it as Bagley. His art is so distinct, but I was like, it was both like I'm glad to see Mark Bagley, but then I was like, would have liked a little more, I guess. You know what I mean?
I mean, like, I don't necessarily go to Bagley for his covers.
Sure.
Like he's definitely had some, like, I mean, obviously my first issue 375, I picked it up because of the cover.
Right.
Like he's got some really great covers. I always think about the one of Spider-Man lifting the tombstone over his head, attacking Chameleon.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a lot of them over the years.
Venom,
but, like,
Lethal Protector. Yeah.
You know, like, I mean, like, I don't want to knock the guy's covers. I mean, I could probably list 100 covers of his that I think are all-time classics. But, like, I go to his stuff for the sequential storytelling and the character work.
Yeah.
And to think that we're not necessarily getting that again. I know we said, like, you know, God be with you, Mark Bagley. Like, you deserve a rest more than anybody. But, like, it still saddens me that, like, the days of Mark Bagley interiors may be past us.
Mark Bagley has also seen 700,000 deaths or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So speaking of retiring, so to speak, you know, Peter kind of gives up here at the end. We get a kind of Spider-Man or you know, champion
Champion no more, Covenant no more. I don't know, right?
Yeah. Like I've kind of said that I feel like it would be hard to pull off the full weight of a nihilistic response to the universe in 20 pages of comic, but did this ending still work for you?
I don't know.
Or are you Spider-Man no more out? Like the kind of like wheel of time marches forward.
Yeah, I that's the thing. I'm just like, it seems so cliche at this point. I'm sorry, but like obviously we know this is not the case because, you know, for reasons, but like I mean, I'm coming from a place where obviously I have bought into this premise less than you have, but like overall, I just feel like this is really what broke him. I mean, I can see it. I'm not completely ruling it out, but like,
yeah, Mark, have you experienced the heat death of the universe? Like, who are you to talk?
No, but like, I don't know. Like, to me, it's more like there's a part of me that's kind of like, maybe this is wrong of me. I'm like cheering Peter on because I'm like, yeah, man, why the F are you doing this right now? This is so yeah, I would walk away too. Like, screw you, Covenant. You know, like that's I get it. I'm not like, how is he gonna worm his way out of this one? You know what I mean? Like, my guess is this is going to be hand waved pretty effectively. I don't think this is going to be, I don't think we're going to get some really compelling storytelling to undo this, I guess is what I would say the
next person he sees that looks vaguely like Uncle Ben is going to snap him out of it in an instant.
Yeah. Or whatever, or May or whoever, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I mean, I'm still like leaving it open that something's going to be very satisfying for me. But like, I think the thing that's missing, you know, I did say that nothing could convince me of Peter quitting because of nihilism. But like, I think the thing that can convince me more in this moment is if like we felt a more ironclad connection between Peter and this contest earlier in the run. Like Dr. Doom just showed up out of nowhere and he's like, guess what? You're doing this now. And there's been no kind of like
follow through
follow through. I mean, Doctor Strange is like encouraging him, but like maybe there could be a guy with a stick prodding him a little bit and being like, hey man, these are the real repercussions. Or like every time he dies, he sees, where is Doom?
Yeah.
Or when he dies, he sees like Sidorak, like banging on whatever the casket that he's locked in, something that would like really make it a bolder gesture for Peter to go like, cause like, yeah, okay, the universe is going to end if he fails or whatever, but like,
what does that even mean?
What does it mean anymore? Yeah, it's the big blue beam in sky at the end of an Avengers movie. Like, it's got to be more than a giant laser that's going to blow up the earth. Like, at this point, we've seen those stakes before. So, like, to me, that was kind of like the thing that's really missing to like sell this emotionally as much as this could be sold within the context of this story. The other thing that I thought was strange here, and I mean that pun intended, is that we know that Doctor Strange has gone through this before multiple times. And so he's experienced what Syra has put Peter through. And yet he doesn't really understand why Peter would quit, despite knowing that that would be a great challenge that she posed. And maybe this is like a bad character read on my part, but like I would assume, like, for whatever reason, that Peter is more capable of withstanding the attraction to nihilism than Doctor Strange would be for some reason. Like, I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well,
like,
that's what that's what I was saying in the first place. That's why I was like, why is this the story to break him? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we would have, if we were going to break Peter, there were ample opportunities to break him prior to this. So yeah, I agree with you on that.
Okay. Just wanted to get your read on it.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't we get to grades? You and a Rochambeau who goes first here?
I'll go first. I'm going to give it a C+.
Okay. And this might be a big divergence for us here.
All right.
Like, I'm giving this an A-.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
yeah.
Jesus
I really like this comic, Mark.
We know what scratches Dan's itch. My God. All right. Well, here we go. I thought Superior Spider-Man 31 was going to be the nadir of our disagreements on a comic, but this might have surpassed that.
Yeah. I mean, like, look, I don't want this to be even 1% of my Spider-Man comics, but as a kind of like what I'm assuming is a climax like of this particular story, and the sort of like showcasing the fullest extent of a perspective of focusing on death, which I think that this comic has been focused on, even back to Dan Slott, and how much that run focused on Spider-Man's kill code and death. I'm ready to turn the corner, and I really felt it here. I felt like we're about to turn the corner, and if they pull the rug out from underneath me,
here's the football, Charlie Brown. Come on, kick the football.
I know. But like, I feel like you get this story, and the next issue is Mark Waid's Daredevil run. Like, it has to be. Like, that's the only place you take it. It's got to be joyful after this. And I am signing myself up to be hurt here, Mark. Is like like nihilism might infect my soul after this story if I don't get what I want.
No doubt about it. I'm ready to be hurt again. There we go. All right.
Well, Mark, why don't you take us home here?
It's that time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode of The Amazing Spider Talk.
Yeah, this podcast exists because of the support of our listeners on Patreon, where very soon you might be able to listen to me eat crow. For only $3.99 a month, you can help support our show's existence while getting early episodes, including these reviews the same weeks the comics release. And at this point, if you're listening to this in our public feed, the first 4 episodes of season 7 of our show are now available on the Patreon. So go sign up if you want to jump deep into season 7 of our show. Plus, we send out exclusive artwork every 6 months, and we have a ton of other bonuses. So thank you to everyone who already supports us and our work. And a special shout out to our newest members, Donovan Morgan Grant, Derivative Zed, and Austin Brooks.
Derivative Zed, what do you think that's about? Anyway, if you value smart comics criticism and historical analysis, we hope you'll consider supporting us on Patreon. What we do on this show is admittedly niche. Still, we feel that we offer valuable commentary and model fair methods of criticism for a character and medium that rarely receives the kind of consideration we believe it deserves. So if that is valuable to you, we can only continue doing what we do with your support on Patreon.
So, Mark, until Spider-Man, like you, attends college classes about Nietzsche, what's our motto?
Must be his freshman year, Dan. With great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk. And just move on from Nietzsche, man. It's like, come on, like that's a freshman thing. You get your mind blown, whatever. You'll read better stuff, trust me, all right? Like, there's more to life than Nietzsche.
My wife did her grad degree about Nietzsche.
God help you, my friend.
Just to give you an insight into my marriage.
All right, there you go. All right.